Okay, so solid waste is, of course, garbage. We talked about that. The components that make up garbage are an important part of it, of course, because they're going to determine a number of different things, such as how long it's going to be around. That's determined by their decomposition rates. And also there are particular substances, primarily your plastics, that have impact, but also some toxic things that might get thrown away in the garbage as well, that forms a major concern with what we do with our waste and things like that. But as I mentioned when we did this, I also mentioned the fact that probably the most environmental impact comes from the fact that you just have to transport everything and all this waste and everything like that, and the processing and making it from new and all those different types of things that lead us to, of course, the conclusion that the best way to have not only the least impact on the environment, but the best financial outcomes is to try to recycle things as much as possible. But we still have garbage we throw away, whether we need to or not. And the main place we put them is in a landfill. It's not a whole lot different than just the traditional dumping grounds or dumping area where you take all your garbage, your solid waste. It's been around for millennia. But there are a couple things that they do to protect that. That's actually down here a little bit. But there's the advantages of that is it's simple to set up and everything. You just have to find an area. But there, with the ones that are modern, you do have to put some safeguards in. It's particular technology in there to assure a few different things. It does take up large areas of land. Not only does it take up large areas of land, it is the kind of thing you don't want around where people are living. It's a NIMBY thing. You don't want it in your backyard. There's a lot of smells and pests and things like that are associated with it. So. But that's still the main way that we get rid of our garbage. And then we also have incineration, and probably just as long as people have been collecting and dumping garbage in a certain area, they've also been burning it, because that, most of our garbage is organic, and therefore most of it will burn away. That, of course, is going to produce a lot of air pollution and things like that. These days we can turn that also into energy, so that's a plus for that, but you still have a lot of, it tends to concentrate your toxic waste and have the potential of putting toxic things like toxic metals and organics and plastics when you burn. You can't produce a lot of passive compounds. And of course, when you burn, the things get into the atmosphere, and therefore it's going to be more likely to spread, more likely to affect people from us inhaling the smoke from it, things like that. And so consequently, there's a lot of environmental impacts from burning garbage as well. Recycling is the best thing. Reduce, reuse, recycle, because recycling itself does take energy, does take transportation, so those are all impacts. So if you can just reduce the amount of materials and things like that you use in the first place, reuse them or repurpose them whenever you can, and reduce the amount of new production from raw or virgin materials as much as possible, you're going to reduce environmental impact as much as possible. And I mentioned the fact that with recycling is good to keep stuff out of the landfill. The less we have to take to a landfill, the better. But the real benefits that we get typically from recycling come from not having to, refine metal from ore to mine for it and all those other kind of things. For most substances, you're always going to have more environmental impact from producing it from new than you will from recycling it. All right, so some of the things they do at your modern landfills, they try to protect the groundwater. That's one of the main concerns of landfills, is that they have a high potential for having toxic materials in them. That's why they tell you not to throw certain things away, and that the water that goes through what we call the leachate can get in the groundwater and contaminate it. It has happened in the past before. New landfills are made in developed nations to put liners and stuff down, protect that, monitor it, and collect the methane and stuff, but of course, the things in other countries not necessarily are done to that level. So we talked about some of the many different aspects of your landfills, etc., that keep it safer for the environment. Questions about any of that? No? All right. So I had our diagram of that. This is just you don't need to know the specifics of this. I just threw this in here to kind of show you what it goes into, the actual technological, high-tech, environmentally safe, regulatively environmentally safe waste-to-energy facility. They can be very expensive and things like that. Like I said, you do get the positive, you get energy out of that. But a lot of the garbage can't go in there. You can't put any plastics in there. They have to sort a lot, make sure they're not getting electronics and batteries and stuff like that that will release toxic metals and those kind of things. And then even at the end there, you end up having a contaminated ash that needs to be disposed of. And those of you guys did the thing yesterday. If you got to the last one about the coal ash in Tennessee that burst out and flooded and contaminated the waters there. Same kind of thing actually from a coal fire plant. So you get the same kind of concentrated toxic kind of ash and waste energy, what they call waste energy plants as well. And there's some novel ways to take care of that, like mixing it with concrete and stuff like that. But sometimes they're just in a big pit and stuff happens, like you saw in that article. So this goes through a proper. So you're going to watch this again. Good pointers on a proper wastewater or landfill. And then we talked about hazardous materials and things that you can do with those things. These are things that you can't just throw in the garbage and haul off to the landfill, or you shouldn't. So some of the different techniques: isolating them, neutralizing them with other chemicals, burning them at high temperatures for your organic pollutants and things like that. And then we also talked about bioremediation using bacteria. Usually is bioremediation. Now I will say this: phytoremediation using plants is a type of bioremediation, depending on who you're talking about. But generally, we use the bioremediation term to refer to using bacteria, and phytoremediation to refer to using plants. But either way, they'll either break down in the case of bacteria, organic waste simply, but they can also, and particularly plants, can absorb toxic metals as well. So that's an added dimension to this kind of handling toxic materials with organisms, is that not only can you get the organic contaminants, like we saw the science fair project with the girl who planted the soybeans and stuff and that had oil contaminants in it, it'll do that. But also if you had heavy metal contamination, they'll take that up as well, to an extent. And then you harvest them and take them out of there. So those are ways of dealing with hazardous materials, material spills and stuff like that, like oil spills. This is also in that category. Those are considered to be hazardous materials as well. Questions about any of those? All right, and then we went to, I'll have to find it. Darn it, I should have had it up already.